Protege talking about corruption in that hit song. Well, my guest this week was Jamaica's Rhodes Scholar in 1966. He is still among the leading academics in the Caribbean. He's a man with extensive experience in politics and even the trade union movement, and he has dedicated these past few years to being an anti-corruption and integrity campaigner. His name, Professor Trevor Munroe, and he's Executive Director of National Integrity Action. Welcome to the program, sir.
Thank you very much, George. Good to be here with you.
Good, good, good. Your middle name is St. George.
That's correct.
And you went to St. George's College.
Absolutely.
And my name is George.
And you are from North Street as well?
Not North Street at all. But look, there's a strong enough link. There you go.
No.
Let's start this by looking overall at the work that the NIA has done. I want to attack it from the perspective of, say, over the last 12 months, so 12 months back from today, so April last year, the progress that the NIA would have made in executing its mandate over that period.
Can I put it in context, George?
Yes.
That the issues that we deal with, corruption, the links with organized crime, building integrity, it's a global issue.
Yes.
The United Nations declared a couple of years ago there is absolutely no sustainable development in any country without a more effective campaign against bribery and corruption. Just a few days ago, the International Monetary Fund indicated that they are going to take a much more robust attitude globally towards governance and eliminating corruption. So we're talking about a Jamaica that has a big corruption issue, but not unique. Two-thirds of the countries in the world, according to the Corruption Perception Index, which comes out every year, rank below 50 on a scale of 0 to 100, where
100 is cleanest.
Exactly.
Yes.
And we are in two-thirds countries under 50.
Yes.
Albeit with very big progress in the last couple of years, which you can talk about later.
Yes.
So that's the context in which NIA has been seeking to, first of all, build awareness so that the man in the street doesn't just see corruption as something wrong, but understands the connection between levels of corruption in the country and why the roads in his community, when they are repaired or patched, the first rain that comes gets washed away, and the same guy comes back to patch the road, paid some more, the rain comes again, and the cycle continues. Largely because, as our contractor general, as our auditor general has found, that very often persons who get contracts of that nature neither have the experience nor the qualification nor utilize the right materials. Awareness building has been a major part of our work, and we do it by virtue of our documentaries. We have a number of documentaries which can be found on our website, on YouTube. The flagship one is called Jamaica's Barrier to Progress, The Cost of Corruption, and that can be viewed. It's been shown on national television here a number of times. It's been viewed by about 300,000 people on YouTube. So that's an important part, the documentaries. But Jamaicans are face-to-face people. So we do a lot of town hall meetings, very often in association with the Electoral Commission, the Social Development Commission, many of the church groups that we work with. So that's an important component. Then there are the community activities, largely in association with the Community Empowerment Transformation Project, which is a USAID project in Jamaica, where we work in building up community resource centers, which are locations where the community-based organizations, the citizens associations have a space, as well as the community safety police program. In fact, one just today in Montego Bay, the CRC has been opened in Flankers, and a couple of weeks ago I did one in Moko in Clarendon. So that's an important part, engaging the communities. But you can engage the communities, you can build awareness among the citizenry, but if you don't have the legislation to deal more effectively with enforcing anti-corruption law, then really you're whistling in the wind. So a big part of our work in the last year has been to follow the ball into the goal. And the goal has been to get 3 or 4 critical pieces of legislation in place. Campaign finance reform, which will make it more difficult for the criminals to give the blood money, as we heard a while ago from Protege. There's political party registration. For 70-odd years, we've had political parties in Jamaica. They don't need to be registered. They're therefore private bodies. that now has changed. Then there is the Integrity Commission,
yes,
where we had a number of anti-corruption institutions, each working hard, but not as effective as if they were brought together.
yes.
And that now is the case. The Integrity Commission has been established, and very, very importantly, a first for the Caribbean, a director of corruption prosecutions is going to be appointed very shortly, who will do nothing else but focus on corruption, particularly at high levels in the society. So that has been the institution building part, getting the legislation, building the awareness. Then of course you need to do the training.
Yes.
So we have sponsored a number of weekend training seminars along with the Justice Training Institute, providing expert lectures and interactive sessions for prosecutors or parish judges, investigators from the police force. And that has been an important element of strengthening our capacity to deal with the corrupt. Not to be forgotten, because we're not in this alone. We've had a number of awards to other organizations who have been doing great work. Outstanding amongst them is the community, the CVSS,
yes,
the Council of Voluntary Social Services, Jamaica's longest serving and perhaps most outstanding community body. They have in the last year trained over 600 integrity champions from all of the parishes, each of those persons having undergone 2 days of training on issues like integrity, leadership, community mobilization, social enterprise establishment, and each of those integrity champions are commissioned to engage others. So for example, I remember when there was the passing out ceremony for the first group in Western Jamaica, a firefighter, a woman from Falmouth, came to me afterwards and said she's so proud because having got the training, she has already brought together 25 people in Falmouth to pass on the integrity training. So the establishment of the integrity champions in the various parishes, extremely important. Now the schools and the educational institutions, as you know,
yes,
the socialization of the young is crucial. And even though, to my pleasant surprise, most of the young people in the public educational institutions, the survey was done last year by the Office of the Contractor General, they commissioned the Department of Government, and to my pleasant surprise, age group 10 to 19, some of what those youngsters were asked, and I thought they would hesitate, completely opposite. For example, one of the questions was, a gentleman is unemployed. He steals electricity, can't afford it. Is this acceptable? 80% of those youth aged 10 to 19 across Jamaica said not acceptable. A lot of scamming. Is this acceptable for people who are hard up, can't earn otherwise? 80% again unacceptable. So it's important to build on that awareness in the schools, and to that extent NIA has been partnering with the Ministry of Education to establish what we call integrity clubs in many schools. So you have not only your environmental group, your debating society, your key club, but also your integrity club. Right now we have approximately 40-odd schools, mainly at the secondary level, who have expressed an interest, and as we speak, the Trainer of Trainers program is undergoing. Some of them have completed the training and are absolutely outstanding. There's a school in Portmore called Ascot. You should talk to the club members there, yes. 30 or 40 odd youngsters. So we've been doing a lot in conjunction, in that case, the last mentioned, the Youth Crime Watch of Jamaica. They've been doing a great job with a grant from NIA. The Governor General's office, perhaps one of Jamaica's best kept secrets. He has a program every year, which we work with that office, called the I Believe program, where he puts on county conferences, Middlesex, Cornwall, Surrey, for the young people, mainly head boys and head girls of schools, prefects, and they have a one-day I Believe in Jamaica. And in that context, NIA has been involved in introducing an integrity segment. The Ministry of Justice,
yes.
Again, they have approximately 7,000 justices of the peace across Jamaica, and regularly now we associate with them, we work with them to do training of those JPs to become more effective leaders in their communities and sort of beacon lights for integrity. So a lot has been happening. We've been involved, not only extremely active ourselves,
yes,
but partnering with others.
Yes.
And one of our most recent important partnerships,
yes,
is with the major organized anti-crime agency, MOCA.
We'll pick up on that in the second segment. So you've heard what the NIA has been doing, not just talking about anti-corruption and integrity and the maintenance of same, but partnering with with individuals and organizations to ensure that Jamaica, the tapestry, the nature of the country is changed. Much more with Professor Munroe after these. Jamaica's Prime Minister Andrew Holness at the 8th Summit of the Americas in Lima, Peru, talking about his government's stance on corruption. Welcome back to the conversation. I'm speaking with the Executive Director of National Integrity Action, Professor Trevor Munroe. In that context, with that as the backdrop, let's deal with some serious issues now. The U.S. State Department, their human rights report on Jamaica for 2017, the state of same in the country, notes that because of the failure of governments to prosecute corrupt acts in the public space, public officials continue with impunity, that's the word they used, to commit acts of corruption. Many people are saying, yes, that is so, and see the State Department telling you yet again, because it's no different to what has been said year after year. While others say, yeah, but that's just perception. That is not the reality in Jamaica. Where does truth lie in this?
Always a difficult question, George, because corruption is a hidden crime that impacts the public quite widely. We mentioned roads a while ago. We could mention unemployment. Part of Jamaica's challenge is that every year the World Economic Forum publishes its Global Competitiveness Report. They look at 150 countries, what are the factors facilitating business, what are the most problematic factors for doing business, and uniformly, corruption, crime, red tape are the top three. So every unemployed youngster watching this program has an interest in reducing the levels of corruption, because without reducing it, we won't get greater levels of investment, both national and foreign, to provide decent jobs, not just bullet work.
Yes.
Right? So it is a fundamental issue, and we have recognized from 1993, the report, I think, on the National Task Force on Crime, recognized and urged that we need to go after white-collar criminals with the same zeal that we go after the gun criminals in the communities, the facilitators.
Yes.
Fast forward to 2014, if you look at our national security policy, which all of us should look at, it's on the Cabinet Secretary's website, one of the main issues they identify in corruption, which they regard as the #1 clear and present danger, threat to Jamaica's national security and economic advancement, is what they call a political system that is impacted by organized crime. And sections of the state institutions, the police, the correctional services, equally so. And on that basis, the national security policy says that we have to go after the facilitators, very often respectable people in a jacket and tie, such as I do not have on.
Yes, such as I have on.
We have to go after them more effectively.
Yes.
But this has not been happening since 1990. That was the last time Jamaica investigated, prosecuted, convicted, and jailed a government minister. That's 27 years ago. And similarly, the permanent secretary at the time. You know, it has been the case that subsequent to that, there have been 1 or 2 attempts which have not actually come to fruition.
And the 1990 case you referred to, the infamous J.G. Smith.
Absolutely.
There you go.
And Probin Aiken, his permanent secretary.
There you go.
So we have that challenge, which what the State Department is saying is what we ourselves have recognized. So we didn't need the Americans to tell us that, because we ourselves have seen that we need to do something more effective.
But the issue I have with this, though, Professor Munroe, is this. The State Department is saying that public officials are allowed to act corruptly with impunity, and despite reports of corruption, there isn't the attendant action against the corrupt. I have a problem with that, not only in the language, but in the perception that is being extended to people who read this report. Because if a publication from the U.S. State Department is saying that we are looking at reports of corruption and convictions for corruption or action taken against the perceived corrupt, and there is no attendant action, so we deem that Jamaica is facilitating corruption, that doesn't make sense to me, because a report of corruption is not corruption.
Well, to the extent that you have investigative bodies that are not just charged with perceiving, but with actually looking into issues.
Investigating, yes.
Right. We've had a number of reports from the Office of the Contractor General over the years, a number of reports from the Auditor General, which clearly suggest that there have been corrupt actions, so much so that the Contractor General's office has recommended prosecutions in a number of cases. We need not mention names, but you know, we can do that if you want, in 2006, again in 2009. And what has happened has proven to be ineffective, not because of anybody's fault. I'm not blaming anybody.
Yes.
The Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions has to deal with hundreds of homicides every year, have to deal with all kinds of serious crime, and they're understaffed.
But you say serious crime, so corruption not a serious crime?
Yeah, but it's among many others.
I understand. Yeah. I'm just drawing that distinction out.
Of course. And to that extent, one can understand the limited staff capability, 44 prosecutors to handle all of that across the country. They've now gotten an increase to 54, I understand, still too small. And they also need to have specialized training to deal with the kind of complex corruption issues involving transnational organized crime. Links with the US, Jamaica, Costa Rica, in Central America, and so on. Now, why I'm saying this is in order to say that investigative action has pointed to acts of corruption which have not been successfully prosecuted for one reason or another.
But the DPP will tell you, that fine, and they will accept that you are putting on the table the fact that their resources are bare in terms of the human resources to preside over the things that come to its collective desk. But they will tell you that much of what comes from the OCG, and the DPP has said so, much of what comes from the OCG or comes to her desk by way of recommendations for prosecution, the weight of the evidence is not there. And so many things are sent back, and so there's this huge gap between recommendations that the OCG would make for prosecution and prosecutorial action taken by the Office of the DPP.
Sure, and you and I, neither of us being attorneys at law.
Yes.
Whereas the OCG is the previous and current, as well as the DPP.
Yes.
It's hard for us to determine who is right or who is not. In this case, what we can say is that there have been a number of instances where, in one case outstanding, a Minister of State was, the Office of the Contractor General recommended prosecution. The prosecution was carried out. The case lasted 6 years. There are 26 witnesses called. And at the end of the day, with the disagreement, I remember 10 pages of opinion from the Office of the DPP. The judge said there was no case to answer.
Yes.
The DPP disagreed, and in fact, that was one of the reasons why the DPP has argued, and I fully agree, that the Crown should have a right of appeal.
Yes. Taking
into account, of course, the issue of double jeopardy. You don't want to try the same person for
twice,
the same crime twice. So, be that as it may, the fact is that now, taking all of that into account, the policymakers with the agreement and the advocacy of NIA, have set up an office which is to do nothing else. So there can't be a complaint of overwork.
Yes.
There can't be a complaint of insufficient technical expertise.
Or having to prioritize investigations.
Exactly. The Office of the Director of Corruption Prosecutions will have as its sole mandate the prosecution of cases of corruption once the investigation establishes that there's a case to answer. So we won't have that explanation, I don't use the term excuse, why high-profile persons in Jamaica are not prosecuted, especially in the high levels of government.
Yes.
The Auditor General's report, you'd look at it every year. Auditor General identifies public bodies where expenditure of hundreds of millions of dollars is either insufficiently authorized or inadequately justified. And yet, little or nothing happens.
Yes.
So much so, referred to Andrew Holness's presentation, one of the commitments made in the July 2016, February 2016 manifesto of the Jamaica Labour Party was that they would guarantee, as a government, that within 30 days of the laying of the table of Parliament, of the report from the Office of the Contractor General, which often is there and nothing happens for months, the Auditor General and other such commissions, there will be debate and appropriate action. That hasn't been done. And one of the challenges that Prime Minister Holness faces is to implement and to activate promises made.
Well, people will say, well, fine. You read the annual reports of the OCG, and there are many, and as you say, most of our parliamentarians, they don't read. And the things that the media lifts from it and writes in news stories, those aren't action, no action is taken. What if Jamaica was in a position where the level of corruption, the perceived level of corruption, was tied to, I'm not going to say aid, was tied to the facilitation we get from our multilateral lenders and our international partners? Because they're saying that there is no incentive for the status quo to change in real terms, because man buys grass for farm as a cabinet minister, no action, nobody died at Green Bay, I'm just using phrases here. I'm a councillor in rural parish council gives money to her or allows her relatives to use state funds to buy personal effects and all of that, nothing happens. There is no incentive to change the status quo. And so, as is the case with Jamaica in many instances, if your multilateral partners, if the foreigners aren't holding you to account for it, then what will change?
I think it's both. You need an alignment of opinion, a strengthening of awareness and public demand in Jamaica, aligned with external partners insisting that their taxpayers' monies, which comes to us in the form of aid or grants, needs to be spent at the target, whether it's a clinic or a hospital or a school, and not ending up in the pockets of some corrupt officials.
Hold it on that point. We're going to pick it up after this break. So that's the second segment for the conversation this afternoon. Professor Trevor Munroe, the NIA's Executive Director, is with me, and we continue this discussion, this very important discussion on the issue of corruption in Jamaica after these. Back with us on the conversation, the Jamaican public feel that something has to change drastically for their leaders to take corruption seriously. Many instances where organizations or entities of the state, commissions of parliament publish reports alleging corrupt activities at the feet of public officials, and apart from a news story and a 9-day, sometimes 6-day wonder, nothing happens after that. Public officials continue in office. They're saying the narrative has to change, the reality has to change. I'm speaking with the Executive Director of National Integrity Action in Jamaica, Professor Trevor Munroe. So, just before we went to the break, we were talking about what needs to happen for Jamaican politicians to really have that incentive, that binding imperative to change the situation where corruption in Jamaica is concerned. And you agreed with me that yes, we have to engage our international partners to say, well, you have to make certain assistance, certain facilitation conditional on corruption being dealt with swiftly, and of course for justice to take its course.
And of course we're not asking them to interfere in the affairs of a sovereign nation. We're simply saying you and us have a common interest in ensuring that your taxpayers' money doesn't end up in the pockets of a corrupt official or a corrupt contractor.
Yes.
Let's not forget the private sector and big businesses in this, but that it reaches the target. And in that regard, George, there are one or two things that have happened. For example, you may recall that prior to the last IMF agreement, not the current standby, but the extended fund facility,
yes,
there was no cap on the discretion of the Minister of Finance to grant tax incentives
yes,
to whomsoever he would wish,
yes,
whichever company. And when you look at the central government operations numbers, which are on the Ministry of Finance's website, you go back and you look at 2010, you look at 2011, you look at 2012, each one of those years, you will see companies and entities getting hundreds of millions of tax waivers. Not charitable institutions, yes, but businesses that very often, when you look at the names, these are flagships that are making
for-profit entities.
Exactly. And the IMF said, no, this is taking public revenue. You're short of funds, and yet you're losing it by virtue of the exercise of a discretion to grant tax waivers, very often to an unjustifiable extent. Very often, the guy who gives up big money to fight the election, his party wins the election. After the election, he comes knocking on the Minister of Finance.
He has to get something.
Remember me?
Yes.
The cap was put, and if you look at the numbers now, very considerable restriction on the Minister of Finance's capacity to grant tax waivers. So that's a justification of the point you're making,
yes,
that the external funders have to take a more robust interest in ensuring that loopholes are plugged, which is one of the reasons why they, like ourselves, are so interested in making sure that the newly independent FBI-type agency, MOCA,
yes,
does its work without political interference, investigating, however highly placed, however well connected, and that is an area that we are very hopeful in. But underlying it all is public demand and public awareness. It cannot be a 6-day or a 9-day wonder, as
yes,
you put it. If the Jamaican people fully understand that our per capita income, as the National Security Policy says, everybody listening or watching a program like this, their per capita income could be 3 times as high,
yes,
often 10 times as high, did we get crime and corruption under control. They don't understand that if you make corruption a 6-day wonder or a 9-day wonder, you're saying to yourself, I like where I am in terms
yes,
of levels of poverty
yes,
and the absence of an affordable income.
People had many things to say about the highly publicized case involving a politician, a respected businessman, and a police sergeant. You remember the Vaz Bicknell Sergeant Joubert Llewellyn issue. Mm-hmm. And yes, people were saying, but you know, yes, he tried to bribe the policeman, but and then he called another policeman and asked him to get him out of the charge, of the jam he was in. But, you know, he was going to the airport to drop his daughter to school, and or, you know, the politician was just trying to help, and he never do nothing wrong, he never kill nobody. So why did we let things escalate to the point where James Forbes lost his job in the police force, lost his pension as a result, and had a stain against his name? Bruce Bicknell was hauled before the courts, and politicians got their name dirtied and all of that. So I say that to say, Jamaicans look at corruption and say, well, they were just people trying to help each other, and never a big thing, he could have let him go, and nobody died.
What you say is true anecdotally, but we and I, and I'm sure you are too, you like to match anecdote with scientific survey data.
Yes.
Now, the most scientific survey data which I have seen compares 2006 with 2017
yes,
in relation to what is connected to the question you asked, Jamaicans' willingness to tolerate bribery, the justification for bribery. In 2006, not surprisingly because of the anecdotes that you and I know, 56% of Jamaicans were willing to say, boy, so it go, or just running. 2016, that's now down to 25%. One of the best in the hemisphere. And in between, I think a lot of work has been done. We mentioned some of the various bodies involved to get a better awareness that letting a man off, giving a blight, may look reasonable, But magnified and multiplied, it hurts the country. Another example, the bribery victimization is what they call it in the literature. That is the number of persons who have been approached to pay a bribe or who pay a bribe, whether for a birth certificate, driver's license, whatever. And that also has seen massive improvement. In 2006, that was 36%, well above the global average.
Yes.
It was 29%. In 2016-17, the last report done by the Latin American Public Opinion Project, that's down to 10-12%.
Yes.
Well below the average for the Americas, well below the average globally. So the anecdotes continue.
Yes.
And no doubt there's some fact behind it, particularly in elections, paying for votes and taking money to vote a particular way. But when you look at the data, there's significant improvement, even though there's a long way to go.
But all right, I'm very happy you went of matching anecdote with data. And I go back to something you said in the first segment about the measurement of students, where they were asked about a man abstracting electricity illegally who was out of a job, and 80% said it was wrong.
Right.
Using that same example and buttressing that point against the point you made just now, isn't it real, though, that persons will see an act as being wrong, but still commit it nonetheless? Because at the end of the day, Professor Munroe, it's expediency. I'm not working. I can't pay the light bill. I know it is wrong to abstract electricity illegally, but I can't do no better. So I'm abstracting it nonetheless, even though I know I'm doing something wrong. Still corruption.
And that's a big gap. The big gap between knowing the right thing and doing the right thing. And that gap has to be closed, because more and more people in Jamaica know the right thing. They understand what integrity means, but very often for expediency, they do the wrong thing. What is going to rupture that disconnect? And that has to do with enforcement of rules, whether it's at the school level, or at the community level, or at the national level. And that's where not just the preventive work is the awareness building. The punitive work has to come in. If you make an example of some very prominent individual who up to now has been able to avoid prosecution and conviction, then when you tell the youngster that crime does not pay, right now we laugh after you.
Yes.
Because he knows what's wrong, but he can see his own too as what's going on in the community. If you can get a couple cases to show that corruption and crime does not pay, whoever you are, then I believe you'll begin to close that gap between knowing the right thing yet doing the wrong thing. And that's where I think we need to go in terms of enforcement, which is why we're doing so much work with the criminal justice system, that investigators, the prosecutors, the judges, to understand that you can't give a lot of scammer a tap on the wrist, otherwise extradition is the way forward if our justice system isn't functioning as it ought to.
But it's true also, though, Professor Munroe, judges will tell you that, you know, the expectation of the public for us to throw the book at these guys when they come is sadly not matched by the quality of the evidence we get, the quality of the cases we get. It does not, it would be a miscarriage of justice for me to sentence a man to the maximum fine on the law for lottery scamming, when the evidence presented in front of the court barely warrants him getting a conviction in the first place.
True, and that means we need to enhance the training of those who prepare the files, and that's happening right now. Just last weekend, newly appointed Chief Justice Sykes had a weekend seminar on getting the backlog out of the courts, and that manifested to me that we're not just at that level saying the right things, but prepared to act, to hold to account those who are responsible for making sure that the cases go through quickly. The second point is sentencing guidelines.
Yes.
We had, for the first time, in December 2017, the publication on the website of the Supreme Court and the Appeal Court, sentencing guidelines. And in those sentencing guidelines, which are designed to reduce the level of perceived inconsistency, it is required that judges give reasons for their sentences, so that there will be some ability to help the public to understand why it appears that X gets 6 months when he should get 60 years, and Y gets 10 years when he should have gotten 10 months.
Yes.
So that is an important innovation, which again, I need to emphasize, will remain hidden, unutilized, unless the public is aware that they can go on that website and see what the guidelines are saying, and hold the judges and the justice system to better account.
One of the few times as we break that I felt like I was really living in a third world country. I was reading the court documents for Buju Banton when he had his court case, and of course Christopher Dodo Skoke, and I was looking at the sentencing guidelines and what the ambit within which the judge has to work, and I'm saying, well, this exists in a country. What happened to my country? I'm really third world. I felt that in that instance, but we have to move from that point.
I tell you one final point on that. You can go on the website in the UK and you plug in fraud and you can see the range of sentences that are entitled. Yes. We need to get there, and I think we are.
Yeah, there you go. All right, our final segment after this, we're talking anti-corruption and integrity with the Executive Director of the NIA in Jamaica, Professor Trevor Munroe. Back with us on the conversation, talking about corruption in Jamaica, speaking with the man, executive director, I almost said in charge. He won't tell you that he's in charge. He works with a team, all equals. He's executive director of National Integrity Action, Professor Trevor Munroe. We've been speaking a lot about perception, and where perception meets fact, and where what can be proven in court, and what the court is empowered to do, the overwork of our prosecutors, how that puts a crimp on their ability to lend their energies to the cases that require addressing, and the message that sends to the public. I want to begin this segment with this. Many people, you do any survey in any paper and they say, well, Jamaica is a corrupt place. The people here say Jamaica is corrupt, and people outside who read what is written about Jamaica will say that, yeah, Jamaica, corruption is high within Jamaica. But at the same time, persons will say, well, you know, the issue about corruption is, if it is that I am to benefit from a corrupt practice, I will go ahead and take the benefit. But if George is to benefit from the corrupt manipulation of a process to get a benefit, he'll take it. But Professor Munroe will be upset if he sees George getting the benefit of that corruption. But if it is that he is to benefit, he won't have a problem. And as long as this problem persists in Jamaica, then the gaps that you spoke about will remain. The difficulties that we have spoken about will remain. And we will be here in 25 years' time, running like a hamster on a treadmill, running far every day, but not moving.
Yeah, well, let me start where you ended, not moving. In 2017, on February 21st, the Corruption Perception Index, no, 2018, the 2017 Corruption Perception Index was launched in Berlin, London, and across the world in Jamaica. We had a press conference along 100 other Transparency International chapters would have been doing the same thing. And George, believe it or not, and I know from what you just said it's hard to believe, Jamaica made the biggest improvement in both score and rank since we have been part of that process since 2002 in terms of the improvement in score and rank on the Corruption Perception Index. So much so that we're in the top 3 of 180 countries in terms of the level of improvement. So we moved, still below pass mark, but if you're a lecturer or professor, as I've had to be over the years, you encourage a student, you say, boss, you're making some progress, you need to move harder.
But hold on, all right, excellent counter to what I said. But here's the thing, we know, and you and I know very well, not all it takes, but a significant reason why the score moves, and moves in a significant way, is with the passage of a piece of legislation. And if you pass a law, automatically your score on TI's index will improve, And passing a law does not indicate that anything materially has changed on the ground. No, you pass laws to ensure that things change materially on the ground. So there's this disconnect between passage of legislation and the actual effect of the legislation on the population. And I'm suggesting to you that what the Transparency International rank is reflecting is the legislative and systemic changes that have been made. But like the U.S. State Department report says, not much has changed materially in how corrupt public officials are brought to book, Professor.
Well, we have to distinguish between what is necessary and what is sufficient. You can't bring anybody to book unless you have the law.
Quite so.
So that the laws are essential, and we've been hesitating, vacillating, putting it off for 10 to 15 years. Right now, with the campaign finance reform legislation, it would no longer be possible for a David Smith,
of Olin fame, yes,
as exposed in the Turks and Caicos court documents, to give, as the court documents allege and have not been successfully denied,
yes,
$5 million to the Jamaica Labour Party before the 2007 elections, $2 million to the People's National Party. That's no longer going to be the case if we enforce our campaign finance regulations. Allegations about external bodies, the Chinese, paying commissions to ministers in return for contracts. That law prohibits and outlaws foreign governments paying campaign funds to politicians or to government ministers in that particular way. No. The first step is therefore to get the law. And that's an important first step, but it's not the final step. The next step is to actually implement it. And that's where we are now. We couldn't be able to talk about implementing the law unless we had it. And the reason why it has taken so long is because of the absence of public and citizen demand, but also the corrupt who are embedded in the authority structures have been resisting for over a decade.
Correct, you are. But I'm saying, and I acknowledge, of course, that the law has to be there for you to then use it as a basis to take the action that is necessary. But I'm saying, I could name you a whole laundry list of corrupt officials in my time in a newsroom where, well, perceived corrupt officials who had serious marks against them, serious stains against their name, who were not dismissed by a prime minister in charge, were not pulled out of office by the persons they collaborated with, and who remained in position and were not made the examples of that you spoke of, that would say to the people and transmit to the people that this corruption is a serious thing, and if it smells like corruption, it doesn't have to be proven in a court of law. You are being removed from that office that you hold. I'm saying to you that for a long time, there was nothing preventing us from doing that, and we weren't doing that. So insofar as the rank is concerned, I'm still waiting for the teeth to be sunk into the flesh to say, yay, we are moving.
And you know what's going to play a big role in that? The ranking that we saw yesterday of Jamaica's freedom of the press, where we're now number 6 in the world.
6 in the world.
You guys in the media, and I use the term advisedly, need to find a way to defy whatever informal or formal restraints there are on keeping 9-day wonders alive, so that the public can better sustain outrage when the outrage occurs. Let's take a couple examples, because last year, for the first time, we saw some fairly highly placed and well-connected persons not getting what they would deserve, but at the same time being committed in a way that had not happened before. I refer to the guilty verdict against an outstanding, well-known doctor, where evidence was given from the political opposition.
You're talking about Dr. Jeff Ford.
Exactly. Yes. What a wonderful gentleman this is.
Yes.
He moved the judge.
Yes.
Prison term.
Yes.
Then there was the case of the famous DJ who thought he was going to be well and free.
Yes.
And had a heart attack of some sort.
Yes.
When the witness appeared.
Desmond Ballantyne, a.k.a. Ninja Man.
Thank you. Then there was a case of the Firearm License Authority.
Yes.
Where the charge was not what it should have been.
Yes.
But eventually, this gentleman, well-connected, was also convicted.
Yes.
So when the national and international evaluators look at Jamaica in last year, they see not only a raft of legislation coming to fruition, but a glimmer of light in relation to conviction. Now, where they need to, you're quite right, the political leadership and the business leadership needs to call out and punish, even without legislation, those who are credibly, allegedly accused for wrongdoing. Shouldn't be in the cabinet, shouldn't be in the leadership of any business body. Once there's an allegation that you're breaching the code of the PSOJ, which talks about not paying bribes, or you're breaching the political code of conduct, which, by the way, needs to be made into a statute.
Yes.
So that people who, as the Contractor General has found, use public money for partisan electoral purposes are not just called in by the Ombudsman to say you really shouldn't do that, but are prosecuted because it's an offense under the law. So I'm saying that when you look at the awareness of the people, it's growing, the demands are growing, the integrity champions in the country are being multiplied, but we need to have 2018 being the year of impact. And in getting that impact, our diaspora has a big role to play. It's good to give money to St. George's College, Alma Mater, to KC, I'm not sure where you went, but you need to go beyond that. All of that philanthropic donation will have less impact if it is not accompanied by governance arrangements which ensure that the money that you give or the donations that you make reach the point that they should impact and are not interrupted before.
Support you on that, but hear me now. And it's not that I'm cynical, of course not. I, like you, all the integrity champions, every well-thinking Jamaican must want the narrative to change and must want real change to bed in. But hear me. Pardon me for being a bit, for not cheerleading. Here's the thing. In the late 1990s, you'd recall very well, I was in high school, I think,
Which one?
Jonathan Grant. There you go. I was in high school when the son of Jamaica's ambassador to the United States, Richard Bernal was our ambassador. His son, Brian Bernal, was convicted for drug trafficking. He was in cahoots with a businessman called Christopher Moore, if my memory serves me correctly, and both were convicted. A magistrate, Norma Von Cork, who was found to have acted corruptly and tried to meddle with the case. She became the first judge in Jamaica's history to be sentenced to prison for a corrupt act. I thought, Professor Munroe, that was our light bulb moment. I thought that was our watershed moment because we're combining criminality as the verdict given by the court with corruption on the part of Norma Von Cork. And both Moore, Bernal Jr. and Von Cork went to prison. And I thought that this was the moment. We're in 2018 now, 18 years later, almost 20 years after all of that. And that is why I'm saying we haven't moved in the way that would have suggested that we would have moved in 2000. I'm just saying the hamster on the wheel analogy, Professor, is not so much out of kilter with reality.
Yeah, there is no reason to cheer. But we have to understand a work in progress. Are we going in the wrong direction? Are we standing still? Or are we going forward? And I'm saying that we're going forward. You mentioned that case of the judge. For the first time now, we have a judicial code of conduct guidelines where you and I can go on that Supreme Court website, an appeal court website, and see judicial conduct, how our judges to behave. Within 3 months, judgment must be written, other things being equal. Accountability, Section 9 of that. We, the judges, are accountable to the public of Jamaica. All I'm saying to you, George, is that levers are now being put in place as a result not of the hand of God, but the hand of man. Advocacy and struggle over the years. It is up to us, the media, the diaspora, those of us in Jamaica in the communities and doing the work in building awareness. We must now hold those levers and make sure that the necessary levers are converted into sufficient action to ensure that you will never get another State Department report saying that Jamaica is soft on persons in high society.
Hear you on that. That's all the time we have, sir. The time
Thank you
very much.
I'm great to be with you. Keep up the good work.
Excellent, sir. Thank you very much. Professor Trevor St. George Munroe, he's Executive Director of National Integrity Action. He was my guest this week. We spoke about corruption in the country, where we are coming from, where we are going, and the fact that the levers, I love that turn of phrase, the levers are now moving, not by an act of God, but by acts of man, and we are moving in the right direction. And I agree with that sentiment from Professor Munroe. We'll be back next week with another exciting episode.